Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on Safely Home Technical Assistant Package. This is just an information session to provide you with a more detailed about this TA package, as well as our partner Youth Advocate Programs, Inc., or often known as YAP. So a few housekeeping. If you are logging on by computer, you should be able to hear the audio already. And if you're connecting by phone, this is the phone number and access code that you should call into. Upon entering this webinar, all participants are muted, but we will open up the audio and microphone for anyone on the webinar to ask questions. We have 2 Q&A sessions during the webinar. So please keep track of your questions until then and ask us. Alternatively, you may also use the question box provided on the GoToWebinar control panel to type in your questions. We'll monitor the incoming questions and answer any of the questions as we see them, or maybe during the Q&A session. Also, this webinar will be recorded, and a link to the webinar recording will be provided after the session today. And so here's just a visual where you will see your access code, your audio pin, and where you can ask questions. And so I will turn it over to our presenters for today, Jill, Gary, and Shayna.
Thank you, Amber. So this is Jill Adams. I know a lot of you through your work with us at CJJR. I am the Deputy Director of Certificate Programs, so I have had the pleasure of some of you as you've come to us for intensive learning opportunities. Others who are engaged with us in different capacities I have also come across, or you may have worked with myself or Amber and our team on capstone projects or as part of the Fellows Network. So it is wonderful to be here with you, and we are really, really excited to kind of walk through this very unique opportunity we have. I'm going to be turning it over in a little bit to Gary and Shayna, who I'm going to let introduce themselves, but they are our partners at YAP. So I will go ahead and dive in. Amber kind of walked through the agenda already, but the goal of this webinar is really to just kind of provide an overview of the TA package itself, give you a little bit more information about the selection criteria, but the bulk of the webinar we hope will be really a learning opportunity for you to become more aware of and excited about, for lack of a better way to put it, kind of YAP's model of service and a lot of what they've done and some examples of their work. Some of you may already be familiar with YAP. Those who are not are probably just interested in the RFA, and you will become a lot more excited by it when you hear about their service. So I'm going to dive in and we'll finish kind of talking about the application process. I will kind of bookend our partners at YAP in talking a little bit about the RFA and then come back in to give you some kind of nuts and bolts information. And as Amber said, we'll have a question and answer session at the tail end about the kind of overview packet itself and the TA opportunity. And we'll also pause after the kind of example section to let you ask questions to Shayna and Gary about their specific work. So we'll go ahead and get started. As all of you know, because you've seen the RFA and the package, we are really excited to be able to offer this opportunity specifically to our sites. So as I mentioned, could be certificate program sites, could be one of our practice models, could be someone who has worked on the Juvenile Justice and Reform Reinvestment Initiative. There's a number of you who come to us in a variety of ways. But we specifically, as we developed this TA package, wanted to focus on you all because you've shown the type of commitment to cross-systems innovative approaches that aligns really, really well with the YAP approach. And we will talk more about that. This opportunity is specifically available through our partnership with YAP, but more specifically through their Safely Home grant through the Balmer Group. So it's really offered a strong support system for communities. And as you can probably glean from the title and the RFA, the ultimate goal of YAP's work and of this TA offering specifically is to keep kids out of facilities, either initially or upon reentry and developing a strong reentry plan for those kids who are in facilities. And really just being able to better serve and more effectively serve and safely serve youth in the community. So with that as a foundation, This package is really geared to allow jurisdictions to establish a tailored YAP community-based alternative model to provide these alternatives to placement that don't currently exist, to implement service delivery and training, and really empower local providers, and to overall strengthen community capacity to work with medium to high risk youth with complex needs. So I think we skipped a slide. Yep, so I'm going back a slide just so I can make sure to cover that. But essentially, the provision of services could include some of the bullet point options you see here. So alternatives to detention and residential placement for youth who have complex needs, support for transition home for those kids who already are in placement, and a specific focus on RED issues, reducing racial and ethnic disparities for kids who are juvenile justice system involved. These are just a few of the opportunities and programs. We'll hear more about them from the YAP team, but I wanted to make sure to kind of pinpoint those. I'm going to go back to the next slide that was up and give you a little bit more information about kind of the goals and the actual strategy that YAP will use as part of this package. So the overarching goal is to safely reduce the use of incarceration and other out-of-home placements through evidence-informed community programming. But a really critical piece, and you've heard me mention it twice already, of the Safely Home work is the focus on young people and families who are living in the highest risk conditions with the most complex needs. So as you're looking at your target population and crafting your application, do keep that in mind. This is a strong focus for this particular work. It is a 14-month commitment. So specifically what that looks like is the first 60 days, so the first 2 months, focus on really preparation and gearing up for the on-the-ground program. So YAP and our center will work with local stakeholders to figure out the project scope and really walk through other local goals and objectives so that the project is really tailored to the community. There will also be, when establishing kind of the local stakeholders, an oversight group that is identified and that will meet regularly throughout the 14 months and will serve as kind of the critical committee who's going to continue moving the work forward and looking at the work. At the completion of this kind of 60-day startup phase, the community will have an evidence-informed program. It'll have been adapted to the local system, and they'll be ready to accept referrals for youth who would otherwise potentially have been incarcerated. From there, it kicks off the entire year TA package support, so it would be 12 months of services to that targeted pool of youth. And keeping in mind that all staff who are hired to operate the community programs that are developed are recruited from the local community. YAP recruits, onboards, trains, and orients staff. So YAP also handles a lot of the administrative kind of logistical pieces about locations, that sort of thing. So all of that is part of this TA package. We have a little bit about kind of not only what it looks like from startup to end, but in terms of monetizing it, it is estimated about $300,000 to $400,000 that's going to be provided by YAP over this 14-month period. So it's really critical, and it's a unique opportunity that, again, because it's only available to our sites, we're really thrilled to be able to partner and really give back something to you all who have done tremendous work already and let you expand on that. So I think we're going to do a quick poll. Actually, that's a good segue to ask, which program of CJJR's were you involved in? So if you could, it should be coming up on your screen right now. We see votes coming in. Thank you all. So it looks like we have about 20% from certificate programs. Looks like 35, almost 40% from CYPM. That's great. And then youth in custody practice model, we have a little over 20% as well. And then we have some of our JJLN partners on, and then a little under 20% of you from other avenues of our work. So that's really great. It's good to see kind of across our programs, the interest is there. So thank you. And then one other question that we were interested in while we have you is whether or not your communities worked with YAP. So that one's just a yes or no. So from initial responses, it looks like the majority is no, with some people actually unsure. So perhaps, yeah, could actually be working in your community, but you're not directly involved. And about 20–25% do have worked with YAP before. So that's great. And we're actually really happy to give you more information about YAP programming, whether or not you participate in the TA opportunity. So I will finish up my section. I'm going to go forward and just talk a little bit about selection criteria. And then, like I said, I'm going to turn it over to YAP to tell you more about their underlying work and some examples of their on-the-ground efforts. So in terms of selection criteria, a lot of this you can see in the RFA itself, but we really wanted to focus you on identifying your kind of core system level goals. So through the application, we want to see a plan for comprehensive systems change and really how this is going to be sustained. So both, you know, the infrastructure in terms of human capacity, but also considering from a funding perspective, when this TA opportunity ends after 14 months, how will you continue moving the work forward in a way that is sustainable? And that's really important because this really sets the stage for a comprehensive systems level change. And that will be a core area of focus as we are reviewing applications. So you can see if you have the RFA and have looked through the RFA, we're looking for sites who have an interest in and the capacity to actually create change in some specific areas. This is not comprehensive, but some of them might include reducing reliance on institutional placement, redirecting sustainable funding to community-based programs, positive youth justice, increasing community capacity to build the strengths of youth and families through services, and also access to supportive people, places, and activities. Family engagement and empowerment, addressing racial and ethnic disparities that can lead to or lengthen out-of-home placements, and increasing community safety. So again, these are certain areas that we want to see reflected in the applications. We want to see where your areas of focus are. But again, this is not comprehensive, so you may have other things that you want to include as well. So I think I'm going to stop there. I think much of this webinar will be geared to questions and answers as well. So I'm providing information, but I may be raising questions for you. So like I said, we will pause later in the webinar so that you all can ask us direct questions. But hopefully that overview was helpful, and I'm going to kick it over to Shana and Gary from YAP to talk a little bit more about their specific programs.
Great, thank you. I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Gary Ivory. I'm a senior executive officer with Youth Advocate Programs. Been with YAP for going on 25 years, and then I'll pass it to my colleague Shana. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started with the YAP model of service. And YAP was founded in 1975. We're, you'll probably know, a 501c3 organization. And I'll talk about the basic core features of our model. Again, we started in 1975, helping to get youthful offenders out of a place called Camp Hill Prison. And that model was very successful, which led to our expansion to where we're now in 25 states, I believe is the last count, and growing. So the model is based upon what we refer to as wraparound advocacy. And by many of you are familiar with the wraparound process, very strength-based, holistic planning process, including family teams, and where families are treated as partners and have voice, access, and ownership in the planning process. So YAP incorporates the wraparound philosophy. We've adopted that philosophy in the late 80s. But the advocacy component of it also is a very critical component, because there are a lot of places to do wraparound, but it's the advocate component that we think is very, very critical, where we hire people from the neighborhoods where young people live, GEDs to PhDs, who really are people who understand neighborhood conditions and are very, very familiar with the young people themselves often, and they're paid. We call them paid. Some people call them intensive paid mentors. We just call them advocates, but they're paid to work with young people a range of hours a week, driven by very individualized service plans. So, just to tell you about how the planning process kind of works, the advocates that are recruited, this positive adult role models, they're the ones who carry out a very individualized plan that's developed in partnership with the family. YAP's model focuses not just on the needs and strengths of that particular young person, but also on the family, and it also incorporates group interventions. By that we mean that we develop very meaningful and purposeful activities that are designed to address the needs of not just an individual young person and their family, but also a group of young people, where it's a very structured, supervised, meaningful group of activities that are developed. Another element of the model is what we refer to as supported work, and supported work is a form of subsidized employment. We go and find places in the community that usually local employers. We don't tend to work with large scale employers, but local employers. And we find places that young people are interested in working. And we make sure it's a safe work environment. If a young person's 14 or older, then if they have an interest in part-time employment, we will find them a place, again, of interest. We will make sure that they have transportation to and from the job, and they will be able to work on an employment site up to 4 months. We also, in some sites, we employ parents or caregivers or guardians as well, and they're paid on a weekly basis. They're considered a trainee for us, and we find this a great way to help young people both to earn a legal income, learn work skills, helps them to get into labor market information, and earn an income. So we find that's a very important tool to help young people earn an income. Just to talk about some of our basic guiding service delivery principles. One is we believe very strongly in a strength-based approach rather than a problem-oriented, pathology-based approach. So everything we do, in fact, our initial plan is called a strength-based strength-based assessment that we develop with the young person and the family. And that could be done at home, in a detention center, at a correctional facility, at any other place. So we conduct the initial strength-based assessment. It's a very individualized approach. So regardless of how many young people we may have in the program, each of them has their own plan that they help to co-author. So they help to write and develop and co-author the plan. There are some non-negotiables in that plan that may be court order conditions, probation, parole order conditions, but we believe that it needs to be very, very individualized. We believe in a teamwork approach. So as part of the wraparound planning process, we develop a team of people. We ask the families, who are your go-to people? Who do you want to be a part of a team of people that will support you? And then we'll invite them to a family team meeting. That usually happens 4 to 6 weeks into the program. Cultural and linguistic competence. So the advocates that we hire, we want to hire people that understand the culture and the language of the young people. So if we're working with a family that speaks Spanish or any other language, we're going to hire people that speak their language and that understand their culture. It's very, very important. I mentioned the partnership aspect of this with families. We go in and ask 4 basic questions. What do you need? How can we help? What can we work on together as equal partners? And once you're stable, how can you give back? Very, very important. Everything we do is community-based. And then we also, once the young people are stable, we ask how can they give back in their community. That can be a form of community service. I think very, very importantly, in our model, there we operate what we call a no eject, no reject philosophy or no refusal policy. So we don't refuse or reject young people on the front end. We're willing to take young people regardless of the complexity of their needs or their conditions. And we don't eject them once they're in the program and say they're too difficult to work with. We always say that we find a way to develop a plan that will that will work for them and with them. So we match an advocate after we do the strength-based assessment. We match an advocate to work with that young person and family. Once we do that and we've developed the strength-based assessment process, we'll assign an advocate, and then we'll assign a specific number of hours. That number could range anywhere from 7 hours a week to 10 or more hours a week, and all of that is face-to-face contact. So it's a quite intensive model. The dosage or the amount of the intensity of the model can vary depending upon the needs of the particular young person we're working with. The length of stay could also vary. On average, our length of stay is about 6 months, but it could be a little bit less than that. It also could be longer than that. So it depends upon the need and the complexity of the young person and family that we're working with. We oftentimes also work with siblings of young people that are referred to the program. So the advocates, this gives you a description of the advocates, the dosage. The advocates are available on a 24/7 basis. So is the program director. And by the way, we recruit a program director from the local. We don't import someone to come and become the director. They're from the local neighborhoods that we be working in. And the advocates and the directors are all available on a 24/7 basis. Very, very important. So we're able to respond to crises, and we also develop safety plans with every young person and family that we work with. So another critical component is that we always like to say in our training, we do a lot of training with our advocates. They go through a training institute. We call it our basic advocacy training. They're certified by Rutgers University, but we always talk about the training: do for, do with, and then cheer on. So initially, we may do things for family or for young people because they may not initially be as motivated. Then we do things with them, that the advocates do and the director. And then after we've gotten to a stage where there's a trust relationship, and this whole model is based upon a trust relationship, we then cheer them on. And we find that that's very, very critical so we don't foster dependency on the relationship with the advocates. Actually, the family team really becomes the one who carries out the plan once formal services have ended. So the next slide shows you a kind of a basic, we call this a bubble chart or life domain tool. And it looks at multiple areas. And how we utilize this tool is that we initially assess what are the strengths in these different with the young person and the family, and then we ask them, what needs do you have? We can have this translated in different languages. In other the families where literacy may be an issue, that's why we use the signage here in case literacy is an issue. And we say, what are the needs that you have in each of these areas? Psychological, emotional, employment, spiritual, legal, finances, safety. And we can add other circles here as well. Then when we know those needs are, then we identify what the resources are that we need to address those particular needs. And then we prioritize the needs. And then that helps us to begin to jumpstart the planning process. Again, we incorporate also whatever the court or the probation, parole conditions may be. Oftentimes, they're at the table when we do these initial assessments. And it's a great tool for us to have families' voice into the plan. It's also a tool for us to prioritize needs so we can be goal-oriented and really focus upon the particular needs and get those needs addressed. I mentioned to you a little bit of detail about supported work. It's 3 to 4 months length of stay. It's a great tool that we utilize a lot nationally to help young people as well as parents or caregivers develop an income as well as develop skills and access to jobs. A lot of young people and families may find that due to an offense that may prevent them from getting a job. So we're able to subsidize their wages. They're paid weekly, and they're paid either at a minimum wage or a livable wage. And a lot of times employers will match the wage that we pay. So we may say we're going to pay you $8 an hour, and employer may say we'll add on an extra $1 or $2 an hour. That's just one small example of that. But we have sites. We would develop local employment sites in a local jurisdiction.
Thanks, Gary. I'm going to take it from here, I guess. And thank you, Amber, for advancing the slides for us. So now you guys heard a little bit about our YAP model. We want to talk a little bit about evidence of our success as you're contemplating bringing this to your communities. So on this first slide, it just kind of summarizes some of the evaluation and research that we have. I'll just highlight one on here is our randomized control studies with the crime lab at the University of Chicago. So far, just to give you our latest update, is that after about 20 months, kids in that program is an anti-violence and trauma-related program. Kids in that program have shown reduction in arrests for violent offenses by 47%. It's a really exciting study that's ongoing there, and we're looking forward to sharing more of that as that study is completed. You can go to the next slide, Amber. And so this slide also has some more just data points from John Jay, School of Criminal Justice, that has studied our YAP model. And I'll just point out here the last one, where we compared young people who received YAP services to young and were on probation to young people who just received probation. And only 4% of the YAP youth got sent back to state commitment versus 21% of kids who didn't have YAP and only had probation. So just another example of the effectiveness of our model as seen by outside reviewers. And we're going to hand out these handouts to you guys so you can go through the data points in more detail. And we just wanted to give you two really quick examples of some of the types of programs that we envision this Safely Home Fund funding for you guys in your communities. One is an alternative to placement, alternative to prison, which is in Marion County, Indianapolis. This was actually a pay for success kind of model, and so one of our metrics was the amount of dollars we would save by not having young people be in some type of out-of-home placement. So as you can see here, we achieved great outcomes, but also saved almost $2 million to the county, and now that is being expanded statewide in Indiana. And you go to the next slide is a reentry program. So we don't want to only focus on alternatives to incarceration, but we also want to make sure that the Safely Home Fund is really about changing systems, investing money so that we can have less kids in placement. And that might be as an alternative to placement on the front end, but also hastening and supporting a smooth transition home on the back end. So this is in Delaware and is designed to bring boys home from their training school, Ferris School, through intensive aftercare services and supports. And you can see here what are the components in this particular program. And so through the Safely Home Fund, we can devise a program that suits your community, that's best for your needs, that could help meet the goals of the Safely Home Fund. So I think we're going to move into Q&A real quick, just about the YAP part. And I just wanted to start with two questions that our partners at Georgetown have already shared with us. One was from a state-based agency that already has YAP in several communities, and they wanted to know if they could use the Safely Home Fund to expand into additional communities, and the answer to that is yes. And the second question that we received is whether the Safely Home Fund has to be used for a YAP program for the first year of funding, and the answer to that is also yes. So with that, I will open it up. Amber, I don't know if what's your plan. I think you're going to unmute people, right, for this part?
Yeah, so I gave everyone access to unmute themselves. So if you want to, okay. You're still on default, mute all the attendees. But if you have a question, just feel free to unmute yourself. There is a little microphone icon next to your name, and then you should just be able to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
So while we wait for folks to play around with that, and we do hope that you all will ask questions, I'm sure some have come up. We also received one other question on the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform side in terms of who is a good based on the sites. So the question specifically was if there's an organization that wasn't a part of the Informational certificate program, but has been involved in some of the reform work that they're doing on the ground as a result of the capstone project, would that organization still be able to take the lead on this project? And the answer to that is yes. We want to benefit the jurisdictions we work with, so we are not kind of narrowly focusing on only the individuals who attended programs can be those working on this PA package. The only caveat I would say to that is keep in mind whoever you're selecting as your lead organization should always have that sustainability goal in mind in terms of resources and funds. But here's some points that I'm thinking folks might have questions, so I'll pause. At this point, I think we have everyone unmuted, looking at the microphone, have the ability to speak and ask our question. So I think what we'll do, if we don't hear any questions in the next moment, is I'll continue to share a little bit about the application process. We'll remute everyone, and then we'll pause again at the very end for a second so that you can ask questions both about the app model and presentation as well as about the RFA itself.
So we do have a question.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
We were curious, we typed it in. How does YAP navigate the background check process required by statute for people that are working on it?
Yeah, if everybody, maybe everyone can mute themselves because it's hard to hear anybody.
So Gary and Tina, I think the question was, how does the application those who are not asking a question, if you can mute yourselves, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I heard the question was, what is our process for background checks?
That's right.
And yeah, so YAP does two things, two answers. One is we do our own background checks. We have a company that we go through, but we also, we accommodate whatever background checks the local jurisdiction requires. So if you do something more than we do, we do that in addition. So we go by your guidelines as far as what you require for background checks. We try to be pretty comprehensive and go by your own local guidelines.
So then I have a follow-up question to that. Do you have any challenges then in recruiting from the community given the background check process?
Yeah, I know, Gary, do you want to take that? We prefer to be able to hire people, with backgrounds, with lived experience. Maybe they had records when they were younger, or now stabilized and giving back to community. And we're pretty good at reaching out and finding, paraprofessionals and people that have a real gut and a real quality and for working with young people in our toughest areas. So our outreach is pretty good. We don't just do ads in the paper. We actually go out and meet with other associations and other organizations and informal groups to really locate the staff.
We also have some questions that folks have entered into the question box. So one of the questions is, when does a 6-month transition period start?
So 6 months is the length of service in the program. So we would start with, I think, 45 to 60 days of startup, and then 6 months would be the length of service, average length of service per young person. So once the program is up and running, it would start from time of referral.
And also, what are the total numbers of youth that you served in Marion County?
I think it's around 60 young people for the pilot. It was about 60 young people.
Another question is that, will priority be given to sites that rely heavily on residential placements and detention?
Can you say that again, Amber?
Sure. Will priority for this opportunity be given to sites that rely heavily on residential placements and detention?
Well, that's definitely one of our goals, to reduce the reliance on residential placement, detention, and incarceration. So any type of out-of-home placement, either in child welfare or juvenile justice. Our mission and part of the purpose of this fund is to change the system and give the system some resources to sustain that change over time, so that the system can rely less on those places and bring kids safely home.
Yeah, and the premise is really to redirect dollars that you're currently spending on incarcerating young people or private residential placements. So the idea, we would come in, provide the initial first year funding to run our program, and then as hopefully we help you and partner with you to reduce your reliance on incarceration at home placements, and as the number of beds and cells go down, you can take that money in year 2 and reinvest it in the program to sustain it. So we know, many times systems just need that extra funding initially to reduce the number of kids in placement by providing an effective community-based service. And then that in turn saves money down the road, which you can then reinvest. So yes, a system that right now is placing more kids than you'd like to place in at-home placements, this would be a really good opportunity to begin to redirect those dollars.
We also have a follow-up question regarding the 6-month transition period. So when it starts, when the referral is made, does the 6-month period start when the referral is made, or or does it start when the youth lives in placement, or starts when the services begin?
Starts the first day we see the kid.
Got it. Great. Let's see. There's also a question from New York. They are wondering how much advocates are paid typically, and also they have some credible messenger programs in New York City. There has been issue with the low pay, and so they wanted to learn more about that related to retention for staff.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it really depends on the local funding. Like New York City would, you probably pay people higher than you would in a rural area or suburban area. But this is where we would work with you, the stakeholders, the referring authority, the juvenile justice system, and what would it take? What would the salary need to be for a program director running a program like this? What would we need to pay advocates, the frontline workers? And so we'd work with you to work out that budget. We'd be spending our own money for the first year, and we could work with you around the actual pricing and the actual, salaries and wages to make sure that, that it's consistent, with your local culture of social services, and that we can really get great people to work in this program. So we would work with you on that.
And also, there's a question on no reject eject. What if a youth is detained or placed after they start the service? Can they continue to work with? Will you continue to work with them?
Yes. Yeah. What we find in our years of experience is that arrest is not the end of it all. And a lot of our kids do get arrested. It's especially in some of the neighborhoods that they live in. So if they get detained, we'll go into the detention center, continue to work with them, continue to prepare their family for their return. We'll appear in court to advocate for the next steps, and they'll hopefully come back into program, and this time have a better outcome. So the answer is yes. That's what our sort of unconditional caring is. We're not going to give up on that kid because of one mistake in the program.
Fantastic. Related to outcome, have you, when you guys work with the communities, have you observed any differences in terms of outcome for girls versus boys?
I know, Gary, Shana, that's a great question.
I don't know that we've disaggregated them that way, to be honest, to give you that answer right now, but we could look at our data, and whoever's asked that question, Amber, if you could let us know who that is, we can follow up with you on that.
I'll definitely do that.
Okay.
And on a related note, some participants are wondering how do you track and record outcomes, or how do you work with a person who gets the technical assistant package to track and record outcomes?
Okay, could you repeat that? I'm not sure we understand the question.
They're wondering how do you track and record outcomes, and how would you work with the sites to track and record outcomes?
Okay, yeah, great question. Yeah, we track our outcomes. We have we put a lot of money in lately into Social Solutions, which is an individualized outcome measurement system, and we have ETO, efforts to outcomes. And we can individualize the outcomes that you want to see, and we can measure it through our software package, and then we can deliver those outcomes to you in real time, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, however you'd like to see them. And
Perfect. Another question is, would this YAP program be a voluntary program or court-ordered program, or perhaps either?
yeah, I think most of our juvenile justice are court-ordered, so it will be up to your, again, we'd work with you around that, but it would be up to your, we usually get referrals either from judges, from probation officers, or parole, depending on where you're placing the program in your system. So usually they are court ordered. And again, that will be up to you.
Another question is, how do you avoid overlap between the role of YAP advocate and juvenile probation officer in systems using a wraparound approach?
Yeah, I don't want to, Gary or Shana, do you want to take that, or if you want me to?
Yeah, Gary seems to be on mute for some reason, so I don't know if he's trying to talk. I can't hear him, but maybe he can chime in. I think, that's part of the partnership, is that we work with, Gary, can you talk now?
Now I can talk now. Thank you, Shannon. I was muted.
Yeah.
So I could speak. But the way that normally happens is we would have an initial meeting, and we with probation, parole, and talk about our role and the level of supervision that young person is receiving. Some jurisdictions have young people on minimum or maximum supervision. And then we determine and talk about our role. For example, we want to be able to provide a lot of flexibility during hours when the young people may need us. And so we would clarify the roles between probation and parole. That's normally a discussion that we have very early in the process before we start the referral process. It looks a little bit different in different jurisdictions around the country, but we would negotiate that and tease that out. But the primary thing is we will want to have an opportunity to work with young people. And for example, if there's a technical law violation versus a new law violation, then we want an opportunity, depending on what that is, to still work with that young person. So we would want to hash out those issues with the local jurisdiction.
Yeah, and one of the great ways of looking at this is, in most probation officers that we speak with, they like the model because their viewpoint is usually, if I only had 10 or 15 hours a week to work with this young person one-on-one by myself, I can really make an impact. And of course, most probation officers don't have that kind of time allocated. And that's where YAP comes in. We're the guys from the community who work non-traditional hours, evenings, weekends, early mornings, spending 10, 15 hours a week, plus supported work in the homes, in the families at all hours of the day and night. And then we're partnering with that probation officer. So it's sort of like what a probation officer it's usually a probation officer would design this program if they had the opportunity. And so they become more case manager, and we become the arms and legs, and out there providing the interventions and connecting the kids with community, with jobs, developing trusting relationships, and then also coordinating very, very closely with the probation officer.
And if I can add just one more thing, the other difference is that our advocates are working with the family as well, and typically probation officers, most of their time is focused strictly on the young person, whereas we'll work with the whole family and siblings as needed to address family needs.
Also, there are several questions about working with families. One is, how does this program meet mental health and substance use needs of family members? Do you guys refer to community resources, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, there's two ways. One is connecting young people to the more formal substance abuse and mental health resources. We like to think of ourselves the connector from the streets to the therapist, from the streets to the substance abuse counselor. Most of the young people that our target population are very resistant to traditional services. They shun traditional services. So as we develop trust with the young person and their family, we then bring them into the other services that they need, to the point where we may actually, convince them to go to a therapy session and maybe sit in with them the first few sessions until they establish a relationship with the therapist, or we'll wait out in the office, or continue to motivate them to attend. So that's our normal way of doing things. But however, if your jurisdiction is interested, we also have a recovery advocate model, where we actually hire advocates who have some or are in recovery, or have a family member in recovery, or have some more education on substance abuse and alcoholism services, and they become the advocate, and then we can even make a much stronger connection to people, and those would be for kids with more severe substance abuse issues. We're also a trauma-informed care organization, so all of our staff are trained in how to deal with trauma, and also how to connect people with therapists and further mental health services.
And then we have just a couple more questions. Someone is wondering, how effective is the model for youth of color? Have you found any evidence on that?
Yeah, we're actually part of an evidence-based plus collaborative with a bunch of other organizations that are led by people of color, or run programs led by people of color around the country. for kids in the juvenile justice system. And there are different criteria around that about how we work, particularly with kids and families of color. And so we're part of that, and we just got the preliminary data back from that, talking about how we're actually achieving and really exceeding the goals that we had set for the programs that are part of that collaborative to achieve. So that should be coming out, I think, in September. We'll be able to share more of that data once the researchers are done with it. But so yes, we have, and I think part of the cultural competency piece of our model, cultural and linguistic competency, and cultural humility, knowing that we're all still learning, but that we're intentionally recruiting people, not only with shared lived experience, but also shared cultural experience, really helps us to engage young people, and particularly young people of color.
Mm-hmm. And that's also one of our major focus is reducing racial disparity in juvenile justice and child welfare systems. And our frontline staff is very representative of the young people that we serve. And it's one of the ways that we sort of gain cultural competence, making sure we hire people who know the culture and are of the culture and speak the languages. And our leadership is a very diverse leadership, right from our board of directors to our senior leadership, right to our frontline staff. And that's a real commitment of ours. My home state is New Jersey, where if you're an African American young person, you're 30 times more likely to be incarcerated than a white peer committing a similar crime. And that's something that we've been working on for our history.
And the last question, is this program ideally for both alternative and detention and reentry, or is it okay to focus on only one?
I think both is good. It's really where do you want to focus the resources that can give you the biggest bang for your buck? Where can you make the biggest impact in your system? Putting the program at the front end, putting it at the back end, or a combination of both, and stretching the resources. So it really will, depend on where do you think you can make the biggest systems change by placing the YAP program in your system.
Awesome. So that's all the questions so far. We have a few that's related to the application. And so we'll save those questions for just a little bit later. I'm going to turn it over to Jill to talk more about the application process.
Great. Thank you, guys. And this is the perfect segue because we are really appreciative of the thoughtful questions. It shows that you are seriously considering this and that we hope we can be of benefit to make your application as strong as it can possibly be. So I will be quick because this is just kind of some technical detail about how you apply, and we'll open it back up. We do see a couple more questions. So the application process is pretty simple. There is a component where you can submit an optional letter of interest. It is optional, that's not required. That is due June 28th, should you choose to submit it. So the goal on our end of that is to just get a sense of the level of interest that we have from various jurisdictions, but also to allow you to start kind of organizing yourselves, identifying partners, and just really trying to move forward with the application process. Sometimes it helps to kind of gel people together before they finalize the application. So happy to answer questions about that if anyone has them. But the full application deadline is August 2nd, 2019. So hopefully that gives you a lot of time to put everything together. The way the application is structured, and a lot of you might be familiar with this, it is an online application. We use a platform called Submittable. There is more information in the RFA than is on this current slide, but essentially you need to click a link and create an account, and then you are prompted and taken through some short answer questions and then essay questions. So for this opportunity specifically, we only need one representative from a jurisdiction to complete the application. You'll see as part of the questions, we are very much interested in who your partners are, who's going to help guide the effort. You'll see that with a lot of specificity in those essay questions, but you do not have to have every person who might be on that leadership team or every partner submit a separate application. You're really picking a point person for your jurisdiction in the application process. So this next slide has a picture of what the actual submittable screen looks like. So once you have created a submittable account and you're going through to actually submit the application, these are the general, very quick questions that will be asked of that team lead or point person. And then you'll see at the bottom it's circled on your screen, a little box that says choose files, and then where the arrow is pointing, submit. So most of you are probably familiar with this, but you'll want to create the essay answers in a Word document and then choose it under choose files and upload it through the site. So it will be a separate document that you are actually uploading to the site. So I do just want to very quickly go through the essay questions with you. You can see them in the RFA itself, but I think it's important to start thinking about it. And in case you have questions about the specific essay responses, I want to just walk through them quickly. So the first is looking at really what your jurisdiction hopes to achieve through this TA project. So we include, if you have it available, relevant data regarding the issues within your jurisdiction that you are seeking to address. So giving us some background about why this is the issue you're targeting, as well as if you don't have the relevant data or you want to collect more, what you plan to collect, what you would want to analyze, and what would help you to achieve the goal. The second question is about your reform efforts, current or ongoing. Could be past as well, but we're really interested in what you've done to improve community-based alternatives for system-involved youth, either currently or plan to do or in the past that is still ongoing. Ideally, we'd have one example from the past 2 years. You'll see that specifically in the RFA. And as part of that as well, we're interested in having you highlight your plan for adopting the principles of this package and the Safely Home campaign, if it is to build on an effort that you're already undertaking, either in conjunction with CJJR or separately. So in terms of how it will interface and interplay with other reform efforts that you're already working on. And then the third question is asking you to think ahead to some of the barriers or challenges that you have encountered when undertaking reforms previously. And as you think ahead, so it's a two-part really. We want you to be thinking ahead to what barriers or challenges you might foresee in this project, but also reflect on anything you might have experienced in similar reform efforts. And the last question is, I spoke to this a little bit in my previous section, but really how your jurisdiction plans to sustain the project, fund the continued operation of the project, and really make that system change something that is embedded and sustainable. So that is, a very important component in this. So those are there's only 4 questions, but there's a lot in each of those questions. So certainly, as I said, only one point person is answering them, but it would definitely be beneficial to be working as a collective, as a partnership with the other stakeholders who will be involved in this effort, because it is certainly going to be a better application and a better starting off point that way. So we're going to pause again, and Amber, I think, has a couple more questions that you all have come up with. If you do have more questions, feel free to type them in. I know we're running low on time. We'll try to get to all of them. And hopefully, I'll just say before we dive back into the questions, this was helpful. I want to just thank our YAP partner in advance for all of your work on this and all of your incredible work that you do every day, but also for joining this webinar and helping us talk through some of these issues. So, Amber?
So one question is how many jurisdictions will be chosen for the award?
Yeah, we don't have a set number yet, but we're thinking at this point from 5 to 8, if they're good applications. And that not only that, but that's for this year. We can always our next round is going to be July 1st, 2020. So we can also, if this works out this year, we could look to doing this again, or to look at other projects we weren't able to fund this cycle. For us, it will continue for 3 years, this particular process.
Perfect. That seems to be it so far.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, so we are at about...
Thank you guys from Georgetown.
Go ahead, Shanna.
I just wanted to thank you guys from Georgetown also for your partnership as well.
Well, thank you. We're very excited about this opportunity. We're thrilled that we're able to offer it to our sites. I am going to sign us off in one moment. If anyone has a last minute question, feel free to type it in. But if not, thank you again. We said this at the beginning, but this has been recorded and we will send it out after the webinar is over. So if you have other partners or other stakeholders that you want to send this to, please feel free to do so. We will also try to get it out more broadly to those who were unable to attend the webinar. And if you do have questions that come up between now and submitting an application or between now and submitting your letter of interest, please reach out directly to us at CJJR. You see on your screen our email address, jjreform@georgetown.edu, or our direct phone number, which is 202-687-4942. We will serve as kind of the landing for questions, and if we need to go to our YAP partners, we will certainly do that, but that way we can kind of consolidate the questions and make sure we're getting the answers out generally. So I don't see any more questions that have come in, so thank you again to everyone who joined today. We are excited to receive applications, and we think based on the questions, we're going to have a lot of good ones. So thank you so much. And again, to our YAP partners, we appreciate you, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.